days. Congratulations, Melissa, new co-host of Outnumbered. It's your first day officially.
That won't keep you away from FBN and our show.
The band is still together.
Okay.
I'm not leaving David.
That's TV husband.
I'll see you at 4.
My wife is still together.
All right, so moving on. President Trump is expected to announce his nominee for the Supreme Court on Monday. A source tells Fox News that he has completed the process. He spoke with 6 judges. We're told Raymond Kethledge is rising to the top. There is also a lot of talk about Brett Kavanaugh still in the pick. And we're told that some conservative groups are trying to stop him because of a 2011 ruling which they claimed helped legalize Obamacare. Democrats aren't happy with any of the potential nominees, including Senator Ben Cardin from Maryland.
I think what the American people need to be concerned, talking about changing the balance on the Supreme Court that's going to affect their rights. A woman's right of choice, labor rights, worker rights. We need an independent Supreme Court that's going to protect your constitutional rights. We're talking about a Supreme Court that will not follow precedent, that has an agenda. The prepare for the president comes from a group that has an agenda. That's what's at stake here. It's more than just one issue. It's the whole direction of the court to follow what the president wants rather than what the American.
Correspondent John Roberts is live at the White House with more. John.
Melissa, good afternoon to you, and congratulations from here at the White House on your new appointment. That's terrific. So the president, we're told, has completed the formal interview process. He spoke with 6 judges. Still a lot of phone calls that have to be made as the president wraps up his selection process. He's got 4 more days to do it. It's probably going to make the decision sometime in the next couple or 3 days. And in terms of whether or not we're going to hear anything before Monday night, you know, the president does have a penchant to maybe mention them in campaign rallies, but he wants to roll this one out. So we may have to wait until Monday night for him to do that. We believe maybe mention them in campaign rallies, but he wants to roll this one out. So we may have to wait until Monday night for him to do that. We believe, after sort of reading the tea leaves and using our divining rod and talking to a lot of sources, that Brett Kavanaugh, Circuit Court of Appeals, is the front runner at this point. Some conservatives are trying to take him out, though. You mentioned a little bit about this at the top because of his 2011 Obamacare, where Kavanaugh wrote that the court did not have the jurisdiction to decide the case on its merits. At the Supreme Court, John Roberts, not this one, the other one, the individual mandate for Obamacare. The White House, if they pick him, will have to mount a defense of Kavanaugh's opinion. Watch for the White House to say the Obamacare ruling demonstrates independence and strict adherence to the Constitution. Kavanaugh, by the way, 53 years old, so he could be a force on the Supreme Court for many, many years to come. Running a close, or it could even be a jump ball between the two, is Raymond Kethledge of the 6th Circuit Court of Appeals. His stock is said to be rising and has over the last few days, again at the 6th Circuit. Like Kavanaugh, he is a Bush 43 appointee, 51 years old, and a graduate from the University of Michigan. Unlike many Supreme, he did not attend either Harvard or Yale. Conservative groups are happy with him, though his judicial record is not quite as comprehensive as Kavanaugh's is. When you sit on the D.C. to deal with a lot of very fundamental things. Judge Amy Coney Barrett is still in the running, but she is drawing a tremendous amount of fire from Democrats who feared that she would be the sort of judge who would seek to overturn Roe versus Wade. I am told that the president would like to appoint a woman and that nominating her would likely put Democrats like Joe Connolly and Heidi Heitkamp, who are in tough re-election campaigns in states that if you're a Democratic senator running in a state and has appointed a woman, the last time was Ronald Reagan, with Sandra Day O'Connor, who was a very moderate, more conservative justice. As to when the president will make the announcement, again, he could tip his hand a little bit at this rally running for the Senate to try to unseat Senator John Tester. But if he doesn't say anything before, we could expect an announcement 9 p.m. on Monday night. Melissa?
All right, John, thank you so much for that. So let's bring it out to the couch. David, you know, when sitting there talking about the agenda that the group has, as what the right wants as Supremes aren't elected, they can't make law. Isn't it? Sitting there talking about the agenda that the group has, as what the right wants as Supremes aren't elected, they can't make law. Isn't it that simple?
I think that's a part of it. I mean, Ben Cardin talked about how America doesn't want well, they wouldn't have voted for the president if they didn't want what he wants in the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court did play a big part in the president's election. But specifically, just to focus a little bit on the list, is that there are a growing number of conservatives who really don't like him. Bethesda, Maryland, sort of grew up in that Beltway environment. It's too much to say he's a part of the swamp because, he had conservative issues that he's voted on. But you already have Ted Cruz saying he's not going to vote for him. The president can't afford, with pretty much of a 50-50, the president can't afford to lose many Republican senators. And if Ted Cruz is against him, that augurs, I think, against his
What is
pick.
Ted Cruz's beef with him?
He thinks got too many. He's going to be the kind of swing vote that Kennedy was. That's what Ted Cruz says, because
not reliable.
He has not been as straight line as somebody like Antonin Scalia, which is what Ted Cruz uses as his model of the perfect pick.
But this female Republican senators who probably want someone more in that model, want someone more moderate. So at this point, he can't really count on many Democrat votes unless he gets some of these reps who want to vote for the Supreme Court justice because they're up for election in November. So he's got a lot of factions within the Republican Party to control. But either way, I think the president will ultimately, because this is the whole ball of wax.
By the way, can I just say one thing about that? Because that brings up a great point, which is the fact that people are saying, well, the president doesn't know much about Supreme Court. It's outside groups that are doing it. Well, it's going to come down to the president deciding who this pick is. So even though outsiders, like they always do, provide a leader as president, the president has got to pick the right choice. And as you pointed out, there are a lot of issues. You're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Maybe we ask Adrian, who's the most on this list in your mind?
That's a good question. I think there's still a lot to be seen and be known about some of these picks. The point that you just, the list here, the president did take the unprecedented step of releasing a list of potential Supreme Court nominees before he was elected. And that list was formed by the Federal Society and some of these other conservative groups. But look, I think to the point you just made, we're looking at Heidi Heitkamp, Tester, some of these conservative Democrats who are up for re-election. And they were also looking at Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski. Susan Collins has made it very clear, who I believe will overturn precedent law, and that applies to Roe v. Wade. She is pro-choice, but at the same time, she does not believe that any sort of should be overturned by the Supreme Court justice who's not
And
nominated.
you mentioned the list that President Trump put together, but arguably during the campaign, that was such a motivating force for Republicans to turn out. And you look at exit polling, and I think it was 21% listed the Supreme Court as the #1 issue. Those individuals broke for President Trump heavily during the campaign. Really smart thing for him to do. And look, President Trump, as Morgan pointed out, you've got some Republicans on the fence regarding the Roe v. Wade issue. Now you've got Ted Cruz concerned over Kavanaugh. So the path is dicey for President Trump. We're also talking about being in the midst of the season. The midterm elections are on the horizon, so that heats things up as well.
But I think this is a motivator, Lisa, in terms of they're trying desperately to find things to get out to vote in a midterm election, which is historically bad.
Totally.
And whenever a president in less than 2 years in office has the chance to appoint 2 Supreme Court justices, just when you gave, Lisa, that is a huge motivator for people to get out and
vote. Thomas Hardiman. I think Thomas Hardiman, he's from Pennsylvania. He's in the Court of Appeals in Pennsylvania, real in the Gorsuch mode. And again, that's the thing. President has Gorsuch behind him. He has turned out to be a really significant force. He's written some terrific Democrats happen to like. So if with that behind him, with that as a model for the president, somebody like Thomas Hardiman might be the right pick.
But it is important to note as we leave that it's not necessarily about the individual rulings. What we're looking to see is on the right they're looking for people who have a very strict interpretation and are not trying to create law. On the left, it feels like they believe the Constitution is a law that changes over time, and you interpret it as well, just so that our audience understands, for sure the difference on both sides. Secretary of State Pompeo on his way to North with Kim Jong-un again. This, as it seems, the North is not beginning the process of scrapping its nuke program. Whether the third time is a choice can do to bend the North to our will. Plus, ahead of the president's planned summit with Vladimir Putin, several Republican senators traveling to Moscow for and bringing a warning whether Putin will heed it.
If you want this relationship to improve, you need to demonstrate that our elections are off limits for your interference.
If I get called out, but it provides hope for people and healing, then it's a good label.
And the pastor hopes that what happened in his congregation can happen again, but this time stage in Abbottstown, Pennsylvania. Michelle Chavez, Fox News.
Welcome back. We start with a Fox News alert. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo heading to North Korea to follow up on commitments made between President Trump and Kim Jong-un at the Singapore summit last month. This marks the third time the secretary has met with Kim and talks to denuclearize the peninsula. Meanwhile, there are reports that some experts in the U.S. intelligence community, North Korea is truly committed to denuclearization. Former advisor to Vice President Cheney and Florida congressional candidate Lieutenant Colonel Michael saying he doesn't trust the North Koreans, and neither does the administration. But the stakes for the next meeting are very high. Take a listen.
I don't think for a second North Korean missile engineers have stopped working towards a full program, and that's why the message has to be clear that it will mean your destruction. We will take military action. He needs to walk away from this meeting with a very concrete timeline of verification regime.
I'm going to start with you. Secretary Mattis a couple of weeks ago said that he has not seen any steps from Kim Jong-un and North Korea in the process of
Right.
Have you seen any positive signs that they're actually willing to denuclearize?
No, not yet. But when Secretary Mattis made that point, Lisa, he did say, nor did he think that's sufficient time, for those steps. So it's been about 3 weeks since the Trump-Kim summit. There clearly have been leaked reports to the media that the U.S.'s facility where they may be continuing to refuel potentially. So I think that this is really a game-changing moment for Secretary Pompeo. See if the North Koreans have any intention on following up on that summit. What they're clearly hoping for is to get out of U.S. sanctions, and we have not in any new front companies. So I think it's really important for the Secretary to get sort of full disclosure from the North Koreans. They need to come to the table and say, here's the weapons that we have, here we have, and oh, by the way, here's all the facilities that we think that are secret, that we've been lying about. Full disclosure, and then work towards a path, a whole process for what the process will be like. Getting that, I don't think that we should release any sanctions, and I think that Michael, who's running for Congress, is right, that we should keep up the pressure.
David, do you think we'll see any of that from this meeting with Secretary Pompeo?
But it's important to keep historical perspective. President Trump is often criticized for not having any historical perspective, but some of his critics on North Korea. But it's important to keep historical perspective. President Trump is often criticized for not having any historical perspective, but some of his critics on North Korea quite well. I'm older than all of you, and I remember. Yes, I remember when Ronald Reagan was doing his dance with Gorbachev, and that took a long time. People think that it's so many years later. People think it happened overnight. Well, it didn't. It took months and months and months. One meeting that we've seen between the president and North Korean leader, who, by the way, I wouldn't trust as far as I could throw him.
Right.
I couldn't throw him that far. But he's a big guy.
He's healthy.
But the other thing is that Mike Pompeo and John Bolton are the complete opposite of naive on the question of North Korea.
Yeah.
I mean, they know exactly how North Korea is capable and has violated every agreement that they've signed before. So they're not going to be snookered here.
Well, and we've heard about sanctions, and Kim Jong-un is going to China. They want ease on the sanctions. Where are we on that front, Melissa?
No, I mean, that's a great point because, I always say that the words and the right focuses on outcome. And when you look at what's been going on with the sanctions, I mean, they have been tremendously tough on North Korea and China as well. That so much of what's going on with this trade war has to do with putting pressure on China about North Korea, and that the more they're economically strangled, that the more they'll cooperate. That hasn't let up at all. And in fact, there's a set of new sanctions ready to go on the president's desk when he decides that North Korea is not cooperating.
If I could just disagree with you slightly there, Melissa, is that I do think that there has been some public evidence that the Chinese and the Russians are maybe backing away from implementing these sanctions, allowing some of the North Korean smugglers to come through. And I think that we're in sort of a period where we're testing it out. So
I meant our pressure on China, not China cooperating, not what China's doing to North Korea. Yeah, they aren't always helping us as much as they act like they are.
Well, and Adrian, what are you hoping to see from this meeting, Mike Pompeo?
Well, I think we all are hoping, Democrats and Republicans are all hoping that there will eventually be full denuclearization. But this is why former presidents have always been with Kim Jong-un and his father. This is why people like Bill Richardson were sent in as envoys to actually have the meetings instead of the actual president, because you cannot trust what's North Korea, right? So for President Trump to stand in front of the United States and the North Korean flag and declare victory.
But do you have faith in his team? Because you look at someone like Mike Pompeo, you look at Secretary Mattis. I mean, these are no doves on the issue of Ambassador Bolton. So I mean, do you have faith in the team that he's put around?
I do have a security team, especially Mike Pompeo and Secretary Mattis. I think these are two people who want to see, who share the same goals that a majority of Americans share, which is we don't want the nuclear threat.
That's the right attitude from Democrats.
Yeah, Adrian, thank you.
There have been so many Democrats, and I'm just going to quote the New York Times, Nicholas Stern, with undermining Trump than supporting a peace process with North Korea. That's from the New York Times. But you're not one of those Democrats.
But I think a lot of Democrats are with the right view of expressing caution, right?
Fair.
Because Trump did jump right into this. And this is why past presidents have taken so long to try to get any sort of cooperation done on this.
Well, we're definitely going to solve world peace on this country.
Yeah. Didn't we already do that?
It's over.
It's my time in the Miss America pageant. Okay, so President Trump scheduled to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin July 16th in Helsinki. U.S. Ambassador Huntsman confirming today the two men will have a one-on-one. Ahead of that meeting, Republican lawmakers were in Moscow Tuesday talking to Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov. The group of seven included arranged to improve the quote-unquote strained relationship, that's putting it mildly, between the U.S. and Russian summit. Senators John Thune and Jerry Moran said ending election meddling is crucial to improving relations.
To demonstrate to America that they want a different relationship moving forward, then obviously staying out of the 2018 election would be a big step in that direction.
Our message to the Russians were, we believe you meddled in our elections, and don't do so in 2018 and 2020. If you want this relationship to improve, you need to demonstrate to us that our elections are off limits for your interference.
So, Melissa, you always have the best quick takes on these, and I'm curious, do you think that it mattered that there were no Democrat senators on this trip? Because it did strike some people as...
It would have been better to have both parties in the picture, but when I think about that last sentence there, they have to demonstrate by not meddling in our election, that's never going to happen. It's right at the very top of Russia's playbook. Obviously, we have to be vocal about it, on guard against it, but the idea that it's not going to happen again, it's nonsense.
Nor are we ever going to get the truth out of somebody like Lavrov, let alone Putin.
Right.
I mean, Lavrov is the trouble. Nor are we ever going to get the truth out of somebody like Lavrov, let alone Putin.
Right.
I mean, Lavrov is the trouble that they're having in Ukraine.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Like, they had nothing to do with that plane going down. I mean, they are such order that to take their word for it, nevertheless, you got to deal with these people because it's a nuclear nation. You have somehow, but you have to start with the premise that practically everything coming out of their mouth is a lie.
So, Adrian, as a Democrat, I'm curious also what you had senators being on the trip, but to the larger point, should President Trump be meeting with President Putin?
Well, certainly, I think Democratic senators this should have been a bipartisan trip with Russia. But what I'm also seeing here is that the Republican senators who were interviewed, who went on the trip, are doing what President Trump will not do, which is saying, we are this meeting saying no more interference in the United States elections. It's a shame that our president will not do that, has not taken leadership on this. And you are seeing Republican senators who are making those conditions.
On words.
Right.
There's
So let
that
me
focus on words. You know, I mean, it's about what is he standing up and saying versus
the result.
What is the outcome and what is he doing. The difference is that when President Trump sits across the table from a leader, and the reason why it was important for him himself to go to Kim Jong-un and him himself to go to Putin is that you know he's not joking, that he will follow through on that red line. And I think they have to look into his eyes and know that it's not an empty threat, because we as a country have been threats now for at least 8 years and more.
But let's also talk about the actions. I mean, it's just pure fiction that President Trump hasn't been tough at Russia. You look at the expulsion plans, you look at the shuttering of the Seattle consulate, you look at the exporting of lethal weapons to Ukraine, you look at energy exports to countries like Poland. Yeah, so I mean, you could go
Syria,
through.
where we actually attacked Russian troops on the ground.
And so there's a reason why there's a lot of friction in that relationship right now, because President Trump has arguably been very tough on Russia.
But I would say that there are plenty of Republicans in the Senate who would be critical, Lisa, and I think I think Republicans in the Senate are going to give the coverage on things like North Korea, on Afghanistan and Syria, and getting that right. I think that Republican senators will continue to hold this administration's feet to the fire on Russia.
Do you disagree that he's been tough on? Do you not think he's been tough on Russia?
I think not publicly. I think he needs to be tougher.
But in his actions.
Listen, they're seeing Russia get away with a ton in Syria. You know,
we killed a couple of hundred Russian troops on the ground in Syria. I mean, that's dramatic. A lot of people are actually at war with Russia in terms of what we were doing against the troops in Syria.
The Russians and the Iranians control Syria. Now, to be very critical of President Obama, in the region in 2010-11, I lived in Saudi Arabia. I watched Russia was not in there. I watched Russia come in because of a weak president. So President Trump inherited to clean up a lot of this
on this issue. Then, what does he need to do in terms of action?
I think the summit presents an amazing opportunity for him to show that he can one-on-one, but at the same time, he is going to have to deal with some really tough issues that he inherited, including cleaning up Syria. So there are ways in which we're just going to have to find, which I do think is why the summit is important.
You and your twin sister are experts in the Middle East, aren't you?
You know.
Yeah.
Who's actually in studio? You can't see her.
Lots of opinions, but President Trump's attorney has just passed. But the president's team, what to make of the delay? Plus, an attorney for embattled anti-Trump FBI official Peter Strzok signaling a House subpoena to testify publicly. An attorney for embattled anti-Trump FBI official Peter Strzok signaling a House subpoena to testify publicly.
President Trump will agree to sit down for an interview with special counsel Robert Mueller in the Russia probe. The president's attorney, Rudy Giuliani, telling CBS News yesterday there's nothing to announce. This is despite a self-imposed deadline on the decision now passing. Giuliani telling the Washington Post last month, quote, "I'd like to get it done, our part, over to them by July 4th. Around that time, Giuliani was also pressed on why an interview decision was still pending and the terms of the president's team, what they would agree to. Watch.
Why are you dragging it out? Don't you know what you want to do now? But you think by July 4th the president might change his mind?
Well, the president wants to do it. So we have to sort through it. We owe him a presentation of something. We are in rather sensitive negotiations with them.
Meantime, Bloomberg reports that Mueller is tapping additional prosecutors at the Justice Department as well as FBI agents, and that current and former U.S. officials say that's a sign he may be laying the groundwork to eventually hand off parts of the expanding investigation. House Oversight Chair Trey Gowdy recently blasted Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein over the seemingly endless scope of the probe. Watch.
If you have evidence of wrongdoing by any member of the Trump campaign, present it to the damn grand jury. If you have evidence that this president acted inappropriately, present it to the American people. Whatever you got, finish it the hell up.
David, what do you think of that report that they may be adding more prosecutors, more FBI agents?
Well, for Rowdy's point, I wonder if that report is true, who signed off on giving all the prosecutors these DOJ?
More prosecutors, more FBI agents.
Well, for Rowdy's point, I wonder if that report is true, who signed off on giving all the prosecutors these DOJ prosecutors? Rosenstein. Rod Rosenstein has to sign off on it. So it gets to Gowdy's point that Rod Rosenstein is not doing due diligence in terms of trying to streamline this investigation. I mean, Americans want it over. That is clear that Americans want it over. Instead of wrapping it up, it looks like Mueller's expanding it, and it's just going in the wrong direction.
Well, in that same report, they also mentioned the fact that they're facing the higher volume of court challenges to Mueller and his team than was expected. So that's in part why they're looking at more prosecutors. Right. But also important to point out about Rod Rosenstein, he was also the guy that laid out the case for firing James Comey and then appoints a special counsel looking at things including potential obstruction of justice.
That's conflict of interest.
Well, exactly. And now after the IG report, I mean, I think that issue is largely taken off the table. You look at James Comey, who is just scrutinized in the IG report, failed to do his job, took unprecedented actions, and even James Comey's own memos say that President Trump came to him and told him to investigate the rest of his team. So I think the obstruction of justice case there is incredibly weak. Adrian?
I would disagree with that. I think there's still a lot that we need to find out, and I think going back to the Mueller investigation, we've got to let this play out. I mean, Whitewater took a long time. Many people can certainly argue that that took way too long. But we're
a lot of Democrats did.
And a lot of Democrats did, including myself, even though I think I was in high school at the time. But nonetheless, this investigation has got to play out. Whereas many Americans may want this to be over, I think many Americans also want to make sure
obstruction of justice.
Many Americans also want to make sure that our elections are not interfered by Russians again.
But maybe I'm interpreting this the wrong way, Melissa. But I took it as, in this report that Mueller is starting to hand off parts of this investigation that aren't related to collusion or obstruction. And so perhaps by bringing more people on and sticking it to the career rank and file people at FBI and DOJ, perhaps it's more sort of money laundering related charges. Because when it comes to all of these people,
if you're right, that's a step in the right direction.
There's no sort of charges on collusion. It's these charges on people money laundering and other things. So perhaps that's why he's doing it.
That is one interpretation of what's going on.
And by the way, it wasn't just Bloomberg that said it. Axios is saying that it is expanding, not contracting.
Can I get clarity from Adrian? Because you disagreed with me in saying that the obstruction of justice case. What's the case?
Well, I think part of the case is why did he fire James Comey?
Because
of the Russian
Democrats, everyone under the sun said that he should be fired and he was horrible.
But nobody believes that Donald Trump fired James Comey because of the way he mishandled the investigation. Secondly, if he wanted to fire Comey, he should have done it literally the day after he became president of the United States.
There was so much evidence, though, that Comey had been doing a terrible job. And both Democrats and Republicans is one thing that this country agreed on, that both sides agreed on, that he should be for a second, that if Hillary had been elected president, she wouldn't have fired him.
I don't know the answer to that, but what I will tell you is that no one fired James Comey because of the way he handled Hillary Clinton's
It's because of the fact he was getting all this...
January 21st.
Amid House lawmakers' search for answers on apparent anti-Trump bias at the FBI, now embattled FBI official Peter Strzok reportedly may refuse to comply with a House subpoena. So what should lawmakers do if Strzok does not agree to testify publicly? We'll debate.
Usually people come to me when they need money.
Yossi Dina is a businessman and dealmaker for the rich and famous. When wealthy people need money quick, they come to him for cash by offering up some of their most rare and valuable possessions. Dina is famous for one-of-a-kind pieces, jewelry, clothes, artwork, and cars owned by icons, but also offers million-dollar markdowns on some of the most coveted items. Yossi carries top designers like Chanel, Cartier, Hermes for 70% off what they are just steps away on Rodeo Drive. People also come to him for discretion. He says some celebs don't want to walk in the front door, so he lets them into his VIP room through the back and keeps his top deals secret. Every item must be verified before they can sell it. This dress is said to be worn by Marilyn Monroe. If true, worth over $1 million. This jacket has been verified, worn by Michael Jackson, and also has the autograph on the sleeve, worth thousands of dollars. And these shoes, worn by Lady Gaga herself, $4,500.
Don't deal with desperation people. No people, they need to pay rent. I have people that they need a bridge loan, like buying a house, make a movie. It's very hard to get money from bank today.
But not everything here is for sale. Some pieces Yossi keeps for himself.
It's from the movie Forrest Gump, was worn by Tom Hanks. I love this piece.
In Beverly Hills, Hillary Vaughn, Fox Business.
President Trump signs the Interdict Act aimed at battling the influx of illegal drugs into the U.S.
This law directs the Department of Homeland Security to provide additional tools and resources to detect and intercept the supply of illicit fentanyl, which is our new big scourge.
New tools include chemical screening devices to be used at border ports of entry and in the postal system. It's Washington's latest step toward curbing the growing drug crisis. At the same time, individual states are launching their own initiatives. Pennsylvania has seen around 10,000 overdose deaths in the last 2 years, prompting Governor Tom Wolf to declare a statewide disaster emergency. First responders will now leave behind the drug naloxone for anyone who is overdosed and might use again. Overdoses are also the focus of Wisconsin, with certain areas now offering prevention training sessions for bartenders.
We see incidents happening in our bars, and we need the information of how to respond.
Recent State of the State speeches saw governors in Florida, Indiana, New Jersey, and Missouri all promising more opioid prevention efforts. Back in Washington, President Trump hinting at additional approaches to the drug crisis, but would not elaborate.
We're going to find the answer. There is an answer. I think I actually know the answer, but I'm not sure the country is ready for it yet.
According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, drug overdose deaths rose by more than 20% from 2015 to 2016, and is expected to climb even higher. In Los Angeles, Marianne Rafferty, Fox News.
When someone watches the news, they want someone they can trust. Our job is to cut through the talking points.
We're going to ask the tough questions because there's a lot of conventional wisdom out there that needs to be challenged.
What I'm doing is making sure that whatever is developed through the day, people are fully informed from coast to coast.
We're 24/7 news, but we're really down to the minute.
We're going to be fearless. We're going to be fair.
Whether it's 4 a.m. or midnight, we're there.
Welcome back. The House Judiciary and Oversight Committees have issued a subpoena to anti-Trump FBI agent Peter Strzok. They want him to testify publicly next week, something he said he wanted to do. Strzok sat down with lawmakers for hours behind closed doors last week. That interview following revelation, one where he vowed to stop Trump from winning the election. Strzok, of course, was a key part of Strzok will answer that subpoena. His lawyer said this.
Somewhere sometime. We just got this subpoena today, so I don't know whether or not we are going to be testifying next Tuesday in front of these two particular House subcommittees. We have come to the conclusion, we've been forced to come to the conclusion that this is not a search for truth. It is a chance for Republican members of the House to preen and posture before their most radical, conspiracy-minded constituents. From our experience with the committee thus far, it is obvious that they don't want the truth. They don't want to hear what he has to say.
Well, last week, House Oversight Committee member Mark Meadows spoke on what exactly the committees do hope to learn from Strzok.
There's a growing body of evidence that while the IG may have been accurate with Peter Strzok's individual bias not affecting the Hillary Clinton outcome, I don't know that you can make the same conclusion on the Russian investigation. I think what we are finding is the text messages were indicative of other decisions that were made or not made throughout the initiation of the Russia investigation.
David, what do you make of his attorney's comments that this is just Republicans wanting to posture?
Well, and he went further. He said these are radical. It's not a radical idea that U.S. justice. It's a cornerstone of our justice system. It's not a radical idea to believe that the FBI sue that political bias, and there's evidence that it was through Peter Strzok and perhaps others as well. This thing has to be investigated, and the questioning of Mr. Strzok under oath is important. I'm just wondering why Pete, by the way, as his lawyer calls him, why Pete is still on the payroll.
Well, I want to see the way that he answers the question. Because I always read the testimony, but when you look at how somebody thinks about something before they say it, it gives you a lot of insight. It's also amazing to me. I mean, he's the one that volunteered to testify. He acted like he was dying to do it. Now, all of a sudden, no.
Now, well, about that, so him and his attorneys are calling for the transcripts to be released.
Correct.
But if his interest is transparency, why not just testify in open committee?
Well, I think, first of all, he should testify. There's no question. But I also think at the same time that Republicans should release the testimony from his closed-door testimony.
Why not just get it out there
with
in
the
the
House.
hearing?
Yeah, well, both. Both should happen.
That
Both
sounds
should happen.
fair.
We do need transparency in this process, and Republicans should release the transcript.
But, there's no institution, organization within the U.S. government that is above scrutiny and above reproach, right? This is why you have congressional oversight, so that the American people can have faith in our institutions. That's why there's congressional oversight. We saw after 9/11 all of the scrutiny that Congress gave to CIA, FBI, in the intelligence community because of all of the signs that were missed. And I think in this moment in time in our American history, there is a large population of the American people who lack faith in the FBI at the moment. And there are so many wonderful men and women at the FBI that I truly appreciate. But at the moment, a lot of people don't have faith in that institution. And this is why we need congressional oversight, so that we trust the people that are not being political.
Oversight is another one of those cornerstones I was talking about.
Do you think we're ever, because the IG report said Peter Strzok not only indicated a biased mind, but willingness to take action. Are we ever going to get to the bottom if any of that action was taken?
I think we can. I mean, it does take time, and to the point that we made earlier, that this thing has got to be wrapped up quickly. If he's obstructing the pursuit of getting to the bottom of this, we got to force him to testify in public if possible. But the point is, there are ways in which the F clearly in those texts to use. To Mueller's credit, by the way, Mueller kicked him off that team, his own team, as soon as these texts were discovered. But he was instrumental in starting the process.
He wrote the memo.
That's
I mean, it's more than instrumental. I mean, he's the guy that actually put pen to paper and started the Russia investigation.
Right. All right. Well, we're going to be talking about this more. I can guarantee you that. But not the next segment, because next segment, Harvard Law professor Alan Dershowitz and actor James, as people close to them are shunning them. And it's all over. Because next segment, Harvard Law professor Alan Dershowitz and actor James, as people close to them are shunning them. And it's all over President Trump and politics, whether that is fair or if it holds more than a hint of hypocrisy. We're going to debate it, so you're going to want to stay tuned.
Of metal, carefully molded and shaped by American craftsmen into a beautiful instrument most often used to play that short symbolic song.
You hear the first few notes of taps and you know right away what it signifies and what it means, and it is something bigger than all of us.
More than 300 veterans die every day, each one deserving to have taps played over their resting place as a final tribute.
He said, no, I want my kids over at the graveside and the Navy guys with the salute and the bugle. And I think that says a lot.
But unfortunately today, many veterans are buried in silence. Simply not enough buglers to play the patriotic tune.
If I'm playing in a church or in a house or wherever they want me to play, that's where I go.
Thomas Day, a bugle player and Navy veteran, founded Bugles Across America. It's an organization that instantly puts grieving families in touch with the nearest bugler.
We have done just a little over 200,000 funerals free for the families of the fallen. And that's our mission.
The company now has 5,000 horn players aged 10 to 95 coast to coast.
In the rain, in the snow, I've played in 0 degrees and 100 degrees, and it's all the same.
Getson Music Company in Elkhorn, Wisconsin teamed up with Buglers Across America to become the first all-American manufacturer of the instrument in decades. Now they're manufacturing hundreds of bugles a year, knowing that nearly all are used for veteran burials.
An eye-opening experience to realize just how many veterans don't have the honor of a live bugler to sound taps.
Together, Bugles Across America and Getson provide a live musician and a brass instrument to salute those buried in the red, white, and blue.
Well, it's the most haunting 24 notes that a person hears, and played correctly, it can make you cry.
Bugles Across America is also trying to minimize the use of these. It's a box that has tap